Beloved seekers of wisdom, dear souls on the journey of life, there comes a time when the fog clears, when the noise quiets, when you can finally see what truly mattered all along. I've lived 99 years on this earth, and if I could reach back through time and whisper one truth to my younger self, it would change everything. Time is the strangest currency of all. You spend it without realizing you're spending it. And when you finally understand its value, most of it is gone. I'm 99 years old now, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that almost everything I worried about at 20, at 30, at 40 didn't matter. And almost everything I ignored turned out to be everything. If you're young, if you're listening to this and you still have decades ahead of you, I need you to understand something that took me far too long to learn. You are standing at the edge of the most valuable asset you will ever possess. Not money, not property, not even knowledge, time, raw, unspent, compoundable time. And most of you are wasting it, not because you're lazy, not because you're foolish, but because nobody told you that the decisions you make in your 20s and 30s will echo through your entire life. Let me take you back to a moment I've replayed 1,000 times. I was 27 years old, fresh out of law school, full of ambition, full of ideas. I had saved a little money, not much, maybe a few $1,000s, and I had a choice. A friend came to me with an investment opportunity, a small company, nothing glamorous, but the numbers made sense. The management was solid. The price was reasonable. I said no. Why? Because I wanted to buy a nicer car, because I wanted to take a vacation, because I wanted to enjoy my youth. And you know what happened to that company? It became one of the greatest investments of the 20th century. My friend, who invested when I didn't, retired wealthy at 50. And me, I drove a car that I can't even remember now, took a vacation that's nothing but a blur, and spent the next decade kicking myself for that decision. That moment, that single choice, taught me something profound. The best investments are the ones that feel uncomfortable at the time. When you're young, you want to live. You want to experience. You want to enjoy the fruits of your labor right now. And that impulse, that very human, very understandable impulse, will destroy your financial future if you let it. Because here's what I didn't understand at 27. Every dollar I spent on pleasure was actually stealing from my future self. The car depreciated. The vacation ended, but the money properly invested would have compounded for decades. That few $1,000s I saved, if I'd invested it wisely and left it alone, it would be worth millions today. Millions. Not because I was brilliant, not because I found some secret, but simply because I would have given it time. Time to grow, time to compound, time to multiply. But I robbed my future self to please my present self, and I can never get those years back. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, but I'm young. I should enjoy life. I don't want to sacrifice my present for some distant future. And I understand that feeling. I really do. But let me tell you something that nobody tells young people. You're not sacrificing your present. You're investing in every future present you'll ever have. The discipline you build in your 20s becomes the freedom you enjoy in your 40s, 50s, and beyond. The habits you form now will either liberate you or imprison you for the rest of your life. And here's the beautiful secret, the paradox that took me decades to understand. True enjoyment doesn't come from spending money. It comes from having enough money that you never have to worry about it. The happiest years of my life weren't when I was making the most money. They were when I finally had enough. That money stopped being a concern. When I could make decisions based on what was right, not what I could afford. When I could help people without calculating the cost. When I could pursue meaning instead of just survival. That peace, that freedom, that's what wealth actually gives you. And the irony, you don't need tens of millions to get there. You just need enough. Enough is far less than most people think. But getting to enough requires something most young people lack: patience. The ability to delay gratification, to plant seeds knowing you won't see the harvest for years, to make choices that your future self will thank you for. I've watched thousands of young people over my lifetime, and I can tell you with near certainty who will end up wealthy and who will end up struggling, not by their income, not by their education, not even by their intelligence, but by their relationship with time. The ones who understand that time is their ally, they make different choices. They save a portion of every dollar. They invest early and often. They let compound interest do the heavy lifting. The ones who see time as something to kill, something to get through, they spend everything they make. They finance their lifestyle. They live for today and hope tomorrow will somehow work out. And 50 years later, the difference between these two groups is staggering. One group is financially free, retired comfortably, able to help their children and grandchildren, living with dignity and peace. The other group, still working, still stressed, still one emergency away from disaster. Same starting point, same opportunities. Different choices. Let me tell you about compound interest, but not the way your math teacher explained it. Compound interest is the closest thing to magic I've ever encountered in the world of finance. It's the universe's reward for patience and discipline. Here's how it really works. When you're 25 and you invest $1, that dollar has 40 years to grow before you're 65. At 10% annual returns, that single dollar becomes $45. $1 becomes $45 just by waiting. Now, when you're 45 and you invest $1, it only has 20 years to grow. That same dollar at the same return becomes only $6.73. Same dollar, same return rate. But that 20-year head start turned $1 into 45 instead of 6. That's the power of time. That's what you have right now that you'll never have again. Every year you wait, you're not just losing 1 year. You're losing all the compound growth that year would have generated for decades. And that is the most expensive mistake young people make. They think, I'll start investing when I'm older, when I'm making more money, when I'm more established. But by waiting, they rob themselves of the most powerful force in wealth building, time. I've met so many people in their 50s who finally understand this, who finally get serious about investing. And they come to me with tears in their eyes and say, why didn't anyone tell me this when I was 25? And I have to tell them the truth. People probably did tell them. They just weren't ready to hear it. Because when you're young, decades feel like infinity. The future feels abstract. Retirement feels like a distant country you'll never actually visit. But then you blink and you're 50. You blink again and you're 70. And suddenly that distant future is now. And if you didn't plant the seeds, there's no harvest. Hair long paused. Now let me tell you about the other big mistake I made. One that cost me even more than missed investments. I spent too much time working and not enough time living. I know that sounds contradictory. Didn't I just tell you to save and invest and be disciplined? Yes, but here's the nuance. Here's the wisdom that took me 99 years to fully grasp. Building wealth is important, but it's not the point. The point is building a life worth living. And if you sacrifice all your relationships, all your health, all your present joy, in pursuit of some future security, you've made a terrible trade. I've known many wealthy people who died miserable, who accumulated millions but lost their marriages, who built empires but never knew their children, who won the game of money but lost at the game of life. And I've known people of modest means who died surrounded by love, who lived with joy, who made a difference in their corner of the world. If I could go back, I wouldn't just tell my younger self to invest more. I'd tell him to love more, to be present more, to worry less about achievement and savor more of the journey. Because here's what nobody tells you when you're climbing the ladder of success. The view from the top isn't as spectacular as you think. And the cost of getting there is often higher than you realize. So the real wisdom I want to share with you is about balance. Yes, invest. Yes, be disciplined. Yes, build wealth. But not at the expense of becoming a person you don't recognize. Not at the cost of missing your children's childhood. Not by sacrificing your health on the altar of productivity. Wealth is a tool, a means to an end. The end is a life well lived. And a life well lived includes meaningful work, yes. But it also includes deep relationships, present moment awareness, time in nature, laughter with friends, service to others. The wealthiest people I've known weren't the ones with the biggest bank accounts. They were the ones who lived in alignment with their values, who built both financial capital and human capital, who knew at the end of each day that they had spent their most precious resource, their time, on things that truly mattered. When I was young, I thought success was about winning, about being right, about accumulating more than the next person. But at 99, I can tell you what success actually is. Success is dying with no regrets, with relationships intact, with a legacy that extends beyond money, with the knowledge that you lived authentically, loved deeply, and contributed something meaningful. And here's the truth that might surprise you. You don't need to be rich to achieve that. But you do need to be intentional. You need to make choices, conscious choices about how you spend your time and your money, because both are finite, both are precious, and both, once spent, can never be recovered. So if you're young and you're listening to this, let me give you the first piece of wisdom I wish I'd understood earlier. Start now. But start with balance. Save 15 to 20% of everything you earn. Invest it in simple, diversified funds. Let it grow for decades. Never touch it except in true emergencies. That's the financial part. That's the part that will make future you wealthy and free. But also be present. Love the people in your life. Take care of your health. Pursue work that means something. Create memories. Take some calculated risks. Travel while your body still works. Say yes to adventures. That's the life part. That's the part that will make current you happy and fulfilled. You need both. Wealth without joy is empty. Joy without security is fragile. The goal, the real goal, is integration, is building a life where you're financially secure and emotionally rich, where you have enough money and enough meaning. That's the wisdom of 99 years condensed into a simple truth: live as if you'll die tomorrow. Invest as if you'll live forever, and somehow find the balance between the two. Ere long pause, I've made many mistakes in my long life. Missed investments, failed businesses, broken relationships, opportunities I didn't take, risks I shouldn't have taken. But the mistakes that haunt me the most aren't the financial ones. They're the human ones. The time I didn't spend with my children because I was building my career. The friendships I let fade because I was too busy. The moments of beauty I rushed past because I had somewhere more important to be. Those are the regrets that linger. Those are the losses that compound. In reverse, if I could give you one gift, it would be the ability to see your life from the end. To look back from 99 and see clearly what matters and what doesn't. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And everything changes. You stop chasing things that don't matter. You start protecting things that do. You make different choices, better choices. Choices that honor both your future security and your present humanity. That's the wisdom I'm offering you today. Not as a sermon, but as a gift. From someone who's made all the mistakes so you don't have to. Tie lesos te shat to og dikidas to learan. There's something that happens when you reach a certain age. The illusions fall away. The pretenses drop. You stop caring what people think and start caring about what's actually true. And what's true is this: most of what we're taught about success and money is designed to make us good consumers, not wealthy individuals. I spent the first 40 years of my life believing that success meant climbing higher, earning more, acquiring bigger and better things. I thought the goal was to impress people, to win the comparison game, to prove I had made it. And then one day I realized something that changed everything. The people I was trying to impress didn't care about me. They were too busy trying to impress other people. We were all running in circles, chasing validation from strangers, sacrificing our financial futures to maintain appearances. It was madness. Complete madness. I remember attending a dinner party when I was in my 50s. Everyone there was talking about their new cars, their vacation homes, their designer watches. And I looked around the table and realized something stunning. Almost everyone there was in debt. Serious debt. They were living in beautiful houses they couldn't afford, driving cars that were strangling their cash flow, wearing success like a costume while secretly drowning in payments and obligations. They looked wealthy, but they were broke. And I had almost become one of them. I had almost traded real wealth for the appearance of wealth. That night changed how I thought about everything. I went home and did something radical. I calculated my net worth honestly. Not what I appeared to be worth based on my lifestyle, but what I actually owned minus what I actually owed. The number was embarrassing. Despite a good income, despite appearing successful, I had built almost nothing. because I had been spending my money on depreciating assets and lifestyle inflation instead of investments that would grow. I made a decision that night, a decision that would transform the next 50 years of my life. I decided to stop playing the comparison game, to stop caring what anyone thought about my car or my house or my watch, to start building real wealth instead of the appearance of wealth. And you know what happened? Within 10 years, I had accumulated more actual wealth than I had in the previous 30. Not because I earned dramatically more, but because I stopped throwing money away on things that didn't matter. The lesson here is critical. Write this down if you need to. Other people's opinions of your success are completely irrelevant to your actual success. The neighbor who judges you for driving an older car, they're probably drowning in a car payment they can't afford. The colleague who mocks you for being frugal, they're likely one paycheck away from disaster. True wealth is quiet. It's invisible. It's not displayed. It's accumulated in investment accounts that nobody sees. It's built through decisions that nobody applauds. It's grown through discipline that nobody witnesses. And here's the beautiful irony. The people who look the wealthiest are often the poorest, and the people who look ordinary are often the richest. Because real wealth is what you own, not what you show. I wish I had understood this at 20, 5 instead of 50. I wish someone had shaken me by the shoulders and said, stop trying to look successful and start actually becoming successful. They're not the same thing. In fact, they're usually opposites. Now let me tell you about another lesson that took me far too long to learn. This one is about risk. When I was young, I was afraid of everything. Afraid of losing money. Afraid of making mistakes. Afraid of looking foolish. So I played it safe. I kept my money in savings accounts earning almost nothing. I avoided the stock market because it seemed too risky. I turned down opportunities because they might not work out. And you know what happened. My safe approach guaranteed that I would never build significant wealth. Because inflation was eating away at my savings. Because keeping money in cash was actually the riskiest strategy of all. It took me years to understand that risk and uncertainty are not the same thing. The stock market feels risky because it goes up and down. Because you can see the volatility. Because the news constantly reminds you of crashes and corrections. But over long periods, the stock market has been one of the most reliable wealth building tools in human history. The risk isn't in being invested. The risk is in not being invested. Keeping money in cash feels safe, but inflation is silently destroying its value every single year. You're not preserving wealth. You're watching it slowly disappear. I finally understood this in my 40s. I took a significant portion of my savings and invested it in a diversified portfolio of stocks. And then I did something that felt terrifying at the time. I ignored it. I stopped checking the balance every day. I stopped reading the financial news. I stopped panicking every time the market dropped. I just let it sit for decades. And that decision, that simple decision to invest and then leave it alone, created more wealth than any other single action I took in my life. Because I gave compound interest time to work. I gave my investments time to grow through multiple market cycles. I gave myself time to benefit from the greatest wealth building force in the universe, patient, long-term investing. But here's what's crucial. I was able to leave it alone because I invested money I didn't need in the short term. I had an emergency fund. I had my living expenses covered. The money in the market was truly long-term money. And that's another critical lesson. Never invest money you might need in the next 5 years. The market can be irrational in the short term. But over decades, it has always rewarded patient investors. So many people get this wrong. They invest money they need next year. Then the market drops. They panic. They sell at the bottom. They lock in their losses. And they conclude that investing is risky. But they weren't investing. They were gambling. Investing requires a time horizon. It requires patience. It requires the emotional discipline to do nothing when everyone around you is panicking. I've lived through dozens of market crashes. I've seen the Dow Jones drop by half. I've watched trillions of dollars of paper wealth disappear overnight. And every single time, the people who stayed invested and kept buying recovered completely. The people who sold in fear locked in permanent losses. The market always recovers. Always. It might take months or years, but it always comes back stronger. Because markets reflect human innovation and productivity. And over time, humans keep innovating and producing. Betting against human progress over the long term has always been a losing strategy. Now I want to talk about something that nobody discusses enough: the relationship between wealth and character. I've met many wealthy people over my 99 years, and I can tell you without hesitation, money amplifies who you already are. If you're generous at heart, wealth makes you more generous. If you're insecure, wealth makes you more insecure. If you're kind, wealth gives you more capacity for kindness. If you're bitter, wealth makes you more bitter. Money is a magnifying glass for character. It doesn't create character. It reveals it. I've seen people of modest means who were joyful, generous, and content. And I've seen billionaires who were miserable, paranoid, and never satisfied. The difference wasn't the money, it was the person holding it. So if you're building wealth, and I hope you are, please also build character, build integrity, build generosity, build wisdom. Because if you become wealthy without becoming wise, you'll just be a wealthy fool. And wealthy fools often end up more miserable than broke fools because they have more resources to make bigger mistakes. I learned this lesson through watching others, thankfully, not through personal disaster. But I saw so many people destroy their lives with money. I saw people inherit fortunes and lose it all within years because they lacked the discipline to manage it. I saw successful business people become addicted to the adrenaline of risk, taking and gamble away everything they built. I saw families torn apart by inheritance disputes and money conflicts. Money without wisdom is dangerous. It's like giving car keys to someone who never learned to drive. So as you build wealth, also build yourself. Read, study, learn. Develop emotional intelligence, practice gratitude, cultivate relationships, serve others. Become someone who can handle wealth responsibly. Because wealth is not just about accumulation. It's about stewardship. You're not just building wealth for yourself. You're building it for your family, for your community, for causes you care about, for the legacy you'll leave behind. And that requires becoming a person of substance, not just a person of assets. Let me tell you about one more crucial lesson. This one is about focus. When I was younger, I tried to do everything. I chased every opportunity. I said yes to every idea. I spread myself thin across dozens of projects and investments, and I built very little, because I never gave anything enough time, enough attention, enough resources to truly succeed. I was busy but not productive. I was active but not effective. It took me until my 60s to learn this fundamental truth: success comes from concentration, not diversification of effort. Yes, diversify your investments, but concentrate your energy. Find what you're genuinely good at, what creates value, what you can sustain for decades, and then go deep on that. Master it. Become exceptional at it. Build wealth through focused excellence, not scattered mediocrity. I've watched countless people jump from opportunity to opportunity, always chasing the next big thing, never staying with anything long enough to see real results. They're always starting over, always at the beginning, never experiencing the exponential gains that come from sustained effort in one direction. The wealthy people I've known, the truly successful ones, they picked their lane and stayed in it. They got very good at one thing. They built a reputation. They created value consistently over decades. And the wealth followed naturally, not because they were smarter, but because they were more focused, more patient, more willing to master their craft instead of constantly chasing novelty. This applies to investing too. I've seen people with a dozen different investment strategies, constantly buying and selling, always looking for the next hot stock or trend. And I've seen people who simply bought quality companies or index funds and held them for 30 years. Guess which group built more wealth? The simple, patient, boring investors every single time. Because investing isn't about being clever. It's about being consistent. It's about finding a sound approach and sticking with it through thick and thin. Warren Buffett, my longtime friend and partner, understood this better than almost anyone. His wealth came not from complexity, but from simplicity, from finding good businesses at fair prices and holding them for decades, from ignoring the noise and staying focused on fundamentals. That's not exciting. It doesn't make for dramatic stories, but it works. It's worked for a century, and it will work for another century. The lesson is simple but profound. Stop trying to be clever with money. Start trying to be patient and consistent. Stop chasing complexity. Start embracing simplicity. Stop looking for shortcuts. Start trusting the process, because wealth building is not complicated. It's just difficult. Difficult because it requires patience in an impatient world, discipline in an undisciplined world, long-term thinking in a short-term world. But if you can master those challenges, if you can resist the temptation to constantly change course, if you can stay focused on what actually works, you will build wealth. Not overnight, not easily, but certainly, inevitably, mathematically. And somewhere down the road, maybe when you're 99 like me, you'll look back and realize that the simple, boring, patient approach was actually the most powerful strategy all along.